Hey, hello, Wine a Bit fans. It's me, Simon, here at Wine a Bit with Simon, and today I am joined by another in a series of very special guests. And this very special guest is my father, Howard Tiffin, aka GP. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you. It's nice to be here. What a surprise.
Yeah, so it's I think I attribute a lot of my experience in enjoying wine and appreciating wine to you and to Mom, because you guys have brought us along that journey, brought me along that journey with you. Certainly in my adult years. And so we're going to start with the wine that you have selected for us to enjoy today. So what did you bring? Tell me a bit about this wine, where it came from, how you found it, and what we should expect.
Okay, so we're going to be tasting Cartograph Transverse Pinot Noir 2021, and I chose it primarily because Cartograph was probably the first winemaker, Alan Baker, who I got to know sufficiently well to understand how he came to make wine in the first place.
Okay.
And what led to that. And we met originally in the tasting room in Healdsburg in California. He and his wife, Serena Louis, were together at the time in the tasting room. And this was over a decade ago now. So we've had a lot of experience with Cartograph. The interesting thing to me about Cartograph was that every step along Alan's life through around the planet and with Serena involved something to do with wine. Mm-hmm. It started off, as I now understand it, on a lake in Minnesota, where he opened up a bottle of a French Riesling in a canoe. Apparently we only have his word for this, because at the time when this happened, easy access to recordings and photography wasn't that great. So he opened this bottle of wine and it changed his life. He began to realize that wine could really say something about where you were and what you were doing and how you were doing it. And so he sort of moved on from his career in classical music with Minnesota Public Radio into the world of winemaking. So his connections with winemaking and the way he got into it is really one of the reasons I find Cartograph such an interesting label.
Do you think, as you've begun to appreciate wine more, you enjoy those stories more, as opposed to sort of a more clinical or curated experience? I think of our tasting at Jordan, where they took you down through the library. You taste the shard in the library, and then the secret door down to the dungeon where you taste the cabs.
Yeah.
And it all feels very done. And I think of other tastings around the Healdsburg area that I've done that felt similarly corporate, is a word I want to use, versus something like a Garden Creek, a Cartograph, and it's interesting that you mentioned last night that Cartograph are abandoning their downtown Healdsburg tasting room in favor of a more authentic farm experience, a la Preston or Devero or something like that. Anyway, do you find yourself appreciating smaller wineries like that, or is it the story less important than the quality of the product?
Well, I think our experience with Cartograph and with the owners of the winery is probably at the pinnacle of those kinds of experiences. But there's no question that being able to experience the wine in the vineyard where it's made is really, for some reason, it just makes the whole experience much more real. Mm-hmm. If one of these hosts in a wine tasting room starts talking about malolactic fermentation for too long, I sort of glaze over. So yeah, I think knowing the story of the winemaker, understanding how they got to be on the land that they're farming or getting their grapes from today and how they've done it is really important to being able to really appreciate the wine. And there's loads of good wine. Yep. And Jordan makes great wine.
Yes,
it's a very different experience.
Nothing against
It's a very
product.
different experience from the experience you'd have if you opened a bottle of Cartograph.
All right, well, let's get into it.
Okay, well,
Cheers.
good health.
Yeah, that's going to sound cool. I'll edit that out.
So, the hallmark of Alan Baker's Pinot Noirs for me is he really lets the grapes do the talking. There's very little evidence of a real effort to try and change the grapes. What Transverse is a collection of the fruit from a number of vineyards that he uses to make vineyard designate wines.
Okay.
So this is sort of his best of the best
Got it.
approach to wine. He doesn't make Transverse every year, I don't think. He'll probably be able to tell us that. But this is a really nice example of what he does.
One of the things that I noted I was reading, because I do a bit of research, and I was reading the winemaker's notes on this one. What they were saying is with Transverse, they hold it back. So they'll make it and then hold it back for longer. So depending, and to let it kind of age a little more in barrels. So the notes also talked a lot about red fruit, and I was definitely getting some cherry on the palate there. And then they talked about salinity, salinity and loam, which I hadn't really considered in a Cardo Pinot until I read it, and now it's stuck in my head, and now I can't not taste it.
Yeah,
There's that sort of there's like a slightly salty note to it at the end, which I think is really nice.
Yeah.
These are fun wines, though. These are young and exciting and vivacious sort of Pinot Noirs.
Yeah, and it's something about Pinot that is just a wonderfully fresh expression of the land it comes from, and at least certainly in Northern California, in Sonoma County, that's one of the things that we find is really very appealing about it. Doesn't mean to say you can't find poorly made Pinots in that part of the country. You certainly can.
Oh yeah.
Do you want to go down that rabbit hole?
We don't have to at this point. That's an interesting notion about the idea of wine, and I use a term that I learned from watching The Wire. Wine that's been stepped on, which is just when the producer, either in an attempt to make everything taste the same year on year, or in an attempt to create something new and different under a kind of an older label, ends up mucking with the product a bit too much, and it loses the character or the purity of the product. And maybe that's a bit of an inner wine snob coming out there. I'm not sure.
Well, and that's something that I'm concerned about expressing here, because it's easy to, I think, say the things I've just said over the last 5 minutes and say, well, there's a wine snob. All he cares about is the land and the geography and the climate and it's.
But isn't that viticulture? I mean, isn't that what
it is? But I don't think I know enough about what drives flavour in wines to really be able to say that's part of my philosophy. It isn't. But
I would argue it's part of your philosophy as an appreciator. You're not pitching yourself here as an expert, as a somm, as a winemaker.
Yeah.
You know what you like.
Yeah, and there are a number of wineries that you can go to in Dry Creek Valley and Russian River Valley, where you can experience the way the winemaker makes wine in the land, close to the land where those grapes have been grown, and it really makes a difference. And I think when you spend a lot of money on a bottle of wine, having reasons to drink it beyond drinking expensive wine is really worthwhile. So
I do remember drinking a $30 glass of Pinot Noir in Toronto at a wine bar, and feeling really underwhelmed by what was presented to me. I don't know what I was expecting, and this was years ago. This was a long time ago. But I thought it would be fun to order a glass of their most expensive Pinot. I ended up and I actually did talk to the wine steward about it, and it became glaringly obvious that it was my lack of sophistication as a wine appreciator at that point in my life that was really the issue, at least according to him.
According to him, yeah, right.
But I think so it's interesting you talk. I reflect back on our dinner at Indienne, where we did a wine pairing dinner, and there was a lot of the stuff that we got to drink alongside that food, which again is a different experience than just enjoying a glass of wine on the porch. It radically altered the way I thought about some of those different varietals. And
Yep.
you know, I keep coming back to the white vermouth, which we
Yeah.
had, I think, with
Yeah.
the chicken tikka masala, which looked like a slice of meatloaf.
Right.
But yeah, so it's. Again, I would never go so far as to pitch, you know, first of all, to throw mud on any winemaker's work, because everyone's out there doing what they think is best,
Yeah. Right.
for what their objectives are. So, so you mentioned meeting Alan and Serena
Right.
about a decade ago in Healdsburg, that's slightly after when Stuart. That was
Yeah.
after when Stuart and Holly moved up there, brother
Yeah.
and sister-in-law.
Yeah.
When did you walk me back through your history as a wine appreciator?
Yeah.
Because obviously you've been on the planet for a bit now.
Yeah, but so it's really interesting. It's really something that's only come about in the last 20 or 25 years. It hasn't always been part
Right.
of us and the way we've appreciated food and wine over the years. On our first wedding anniversary, your mother and I went to a, would you believe, Chinese restaurant in Chalkwell in Essex.
Okay.
And it was at the time the finest restaurant in the area. And the interesting thing about it was the tablecloths were black. I mean, I can remember very little about the evening.
Yeah.
Can't remember the food really, but the tablecloths were black. And neither Jane nor I knew very much about wine at all. Mm-hmm. So we had a bottle of Tavel Rosé.
Okay.
That was the one wine that we had heard of that was on the menu, on the wine list. Well, I don't know if there was a wine list even, but it was on the menu there.
yeah.
Would have gone with anything. And it was a slightly effervescent Portuguese rosé, which was sort of typical of the kinds of things that you drink at that stage. So
Pairs well with General Tso's chicken.
apparently so, although I'm not sure that we were up to that. But anyway, so that's the first wine I can recall ever trying. I mean, we had champagne at our wedding reception, but really I have no idea what it was.
Yeah.
I know we didn't drink much of it because we had to run to get the plane to go on our honeymoon. But so that, and then it really wasn't until I started to travel in the US on business, and on one occasion we ended up in San Diego at a conference, and someone said, "Oh, you should really go out to Temecula and taste wine in Temecula."
Okay.
And Temecula is a really hot valley in internal
Yeah.
California, half an hour, 45 minutes from San Diego over the hills, and you go into this hot little valley, and they make really, really bold, peppery reds, Zinfandels, and I mean it was, and we got to meet the winemaker at a winery, Hart Winery, next door to Callaway, in the days when golf club manufacturers thought that owning a winery was the best way to extend their brand.
Okay.
But why not? And so Joe Hart was the name of this winemaker, and as far as I recall, everything he made was wine that he derived from grapes on his own estate, which was a sloping piece of land down towards the Temecula Valley. I don't know where but that's about all I know about it. I remember we went one night to a dinner at the property where the local, they had a local cook came in to make paella. And this paella was very rich, robust, and went beautifully with these rich, robust, earthy red wines.
Sure.
And the other thing I remember about Joe Hart was that he made a really interesting, because never tasted anything like it before, dessert wine.
Okay.
So those were the two things about Joe Hart and Temecula Valley. And from there we just sort of began to take more interest in small batch, locally produced wines. And I think in the early 2000s, I was introduced to Ridge,
Yep.
Lytton Springs, Field Blend Zinfandel.
Yeah.
And I didn't actually know what a field blend was at that stage. I didn't know where it came from in California. Only now do I understand that it's from Healdsburg, basically.
Yeah.
It's a northern Sonoma County, really phenomenal Zin blend red wine. But so, and the reason I got into that was that through my work, I ended up spending the best part of, I don't know, months out in Las Vegas, trying to right the ship for a casino that had really run into problems after 9/11. And it turned out that the investment really worked out fine for us and for the successor owners of the casino. And I was introduced there by the owner, by the general manager of the property, to Ridge Lytton Springs.
I remember.
And
I remember him.
You do?
Yeah.
Bill Timmons.
Bill Timmons, from when we went, when you, Mom, and I, and Jen went for that. And in the time it took, talk about hospitality, he met us at the dinner table. We were at dinner, right? Having a late dinner at the steakhouse.
Yep.
He had a bottle of champagne simultaneously arrive as he did at the table to say hello to you. And in the 35 to 40 minutes it took us to eat our meal and get back up to the room, there were already 2 bottles of wine up there with a handwritten note from him.
Yeah.
That's a guy who understood how Vegas was supposed to work.
And he's a total professional in the world of hospitality.
And so he introduced you to Ridge. I feel like Ridge is like the gateway. Ridge is a gateway winemaker for people who are interested. If you could peek at Ridge and you could say, I've reached the mountaintop. Because I know people who Ridge, they see Ridge as I'm never going to spend more than $45 on a bottle of wine, and I can buy Ridge, and I know it's going to be great. And I know people who think of that as their everyday. Yeah. This is the wine I open on a Wednesday night when I want a bottle, and there's the good stuff for the quote unquote good stuff for the weekend. So that's wild.
So
I didn't realize it was I didn't realize it was so recent.
Oh yeah.
I thought you and Mom had been sort of like into it for a bit longer.
Not really, no. And I mean, it's. I would just as soon have had a beer at the end of a day in the office as anything else.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's fairly recent.
Okay.
But I think Stuart and Holly moving to Healdsburg
didn't hurt.
Sort of accelerated our interest in really nice wine.
Well, you can't swing a dead cat in that town without finding a new winery where somebody who staged or interned under one of the great California winemakers is setting up a shop and doing a thing and blah blah blah. So it totally makes sense.
It's another step on the path here that's kind of interesting. So during COVID, the wineries were, especially in California, they were all closed. They couldn't entertain guests. They couldn't have tastings. None of those things were happening. But what several of them did was they conducted tastings online.
Yep.
And I mean, you and I have had a couple of those, right? And one of them that I remember really fondly was the winemaker at Williams-Sellium, who are probably one of the finest producers of Pinots from a variety of different vineyards in the area, in the Russian River Valley and the Dry Creek Valley. And they did these wine tastings with the winemaker, and he would go through 5 or 6 wines. They make great Chardonnays. They make really good Pinot Noirs. They make a few Zins as well, and they have a Cabernet or 2 on their list as well. Which, anyway, but it's so and just being able to spend that amount of time in the company, even though it was on Zoom, with a winemaker, explaining what it was they were looking for when they saw the grapes on the vine before the harvest, what they were waiting for in terms of sugar content before they harvested them, 1 o'clock in the morning, what we were doing in the vineyard with the crew picking the grapes. I mean, just having that hands-on expression of the way in which the whole process of work was really, really terrific. And you generally don't get that opportunity
At the winery.
At the winery.
Yeah.
So COVID introduced that level of attention, I think, to the use of social media by winemakers, and they've done a much better job since then, I think, of explaining what it is they do.
You always bring it back to the business end of it. I love that. That's all very cool. I honestly, I find myself a bit flabbergasted how that journey has only been about between 25 and 30 years in the making, right? If that.
And I'm sure we were drinking wine in all the intervening years, but it was just a drink.
Yeah.
It wasn't because I was enjoying the wine in the way that I do today.
Yeah. So understanding again, as an appreciator, you understand it on a different level, and now you've sort of, as you are wont to do, you've gone deep and quickly.
Well, somewhat deep.
Somewhat deep. I mean, but no, I think the level of understanding begets a willingness to try new things, and begets a willingness to be open to new ideas or new concepts, or listen to, if you go and sit with a winemaker for the first time, and they're pitching something to you that you have absolutely no interest in, but you'll give it a shot because, okay, this is anyway, you mentioned something a bit ago I wanted to touch on. You talked about the fruit in the field and being with the winemaker in the field where the fruit comes from. And I remember talking to a young winemaker up in Portland who talked about how she had all her fruit was shipped from Sonoma County. But because of innovations in intermodal logistics and their ability to flash freeze grapes, that they could put them on trains and have them at her winery, at her crush pad or wherever, and it was still, as valid as it was the day when it was night harvested, and whatever the whole, all that nonsense was. So, who knows? Anyway,
I don't understand enough of the way in which those things work to really be able to pass judgment. But I will say that I've had wine made by the same winemaker where the grapes were grown 200 miles south of Healdsburg, and there's something, maybe it's all just sort of psychology, but there's something about the quality of those wines that just bothers me. And so I could drink, and I can think of one particular winemaker who gets grapes from Pinot Noir grapes from the Santa Rita Hills, which is in south central California, and then harvest them locally as well. And I just think the grapes or the wine from the Santa Rita Hills region I find it less compelling.
Yeah.
I mean, and maybe it could be completely psychological, but.
You think how much of it is what is the sort of like a placebo effect, or
could be.
How much of how much do you attribute to that in your level as a wine appreciator?
It's got to the stage though now where if we're going to a tasting and someone says, "Well, we've got this from Santa Rita Hills," I say, "No, I'm not interested." Which does mean that I'm probably not giving it the serious attention I ought to.
Okay, moving on. So the whole thing with this is, when I started this podcast, I enjoy wine. I know a lot of my friends enjoy wine, but I also feel like I'm very lucky to be surrounded by people who just have interesting stories to tell. And we talked about this briefly yesterday, and I gave you the heads up. One of the things that we talk about a lot, especially as parents, and parents of teenagers, is how we need children. Our children have lost lost natural resilience. Things get hard, they fold. There doesn't seem to be a lot of, so it's a constant conversation as a parent and as somebody who's doing a lot of studying in psychology now, where we talk about how we all have natural resilience within us, and we need to learn how to harness it. You, over the course of, I think back to the year that Stuart graduated, when Stuart was a senior in college, or the year he graduated from college, when you had a job in Chicago that you loved, that you'd been at for a long time, and they didn't want to fire you because that would have been too expensive for them, so they sort of benched you, right? It was a big deal, was it not?
It was, but it was. Let me just. So I.
Names are. We're not using names.
No,
Just
no.
kidding.
I'd seen a corner of the financial services marketplace when I was doing that job that really intrigued me. And and I was working for a bank. When you work for a bank, I think it's really hard, especially a big bank. It's really hard to measure the impact that you have on the business, and they make an attempt, but I'm not sure that it ever really works. And so people who do a good job, keep their heads down and say nothing, never really get the appreciation that they probably deserve. And I'm not saying that was my case, but I do think that there are many people in the industry for whom that would be true. So, but what I found was I was being exposed to portfolio managers at investment management companies. And these people were assessed every single day with the valuations that were being put on the portfolios that they'd constructed.
Okay.
And then they were being compared with everyone else in their peer group. How well are you doing? Are you making good investment decisions or poor investment decisions? And so one thing led to another, and I had the opportunity to. I knew that a portfolio manager was going to be leaving one of the companies that I'd been closely connected with, and it was a sort of an iterative process. But they said, "Would you be ever interested in coming and doing something like this for us?"
Okay.
And I said, "Well, yeah, I think I would. I mean, I would." I felt as if I had the skills to be able to make that happen.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to an analyst who was sort of assessing the funds that we were running, and you have to be introduced to the analysts, and then they kind of make a judgment about you and the performance. And he said, "I've seen your resume." He said, "This isn't a resume, this is a pedigree."
Ooh.
And I thought, and I'd never had anybody actually say anything like that to me before, and I just thought, oh yeah, I guess I have done a lot of interesting things over the last few years. So anyway,
was that a career pivot?
In a way. I mean, I was using the skills that I'd had, but I was emphasizing communications and marketing in ways that I'd not been able to do it before.
Okay.
And so, but the risk management, risk assessment, judgment, those things that have been part of my portfolio of skills that I developed really came to the fore in that change of jobs and going into portfolio management. And so the example I gave earlier of the casino in Las Vegas, I not only got to know in detail the financial wherewithal of that enterprise, I also got to really make judgments about the management team.
Yeah.
And so there's a very important human component to how an enterprise is likely to perform, what they're going to do, and so on. So, resilience, I'm not sure. I
think I chose a terrible example, is what I think happened right there. Fun story.
Well, but it's so. The only thing I'd say about resilience is that if you if you know you have a skill set and you want to be able to sort of optimize that set of skills, look for opportunities to use it, even if it's not in the sort of mainstream of what you're doing at the time you're doing it. So, at the beginning of my career, the saying, I was working in London at the time,
Yep.
and there was all decisions about who was going to do what job were made by the staff department, capital S, capital D. And the sort of joke, but it wasn't a joke really, was you had to keep your file on top of the pile.
Can I just say, you have said that to me. That has been a thing you have told me half a dozen times over the course of my life.
Yeah.
So, yeah, okay, yep.
And
Familiar with the
so
saying.
it was, that was not, I mean, I just used to smile because I thought it was a neat thing to say, but I do think that staying in front of people, making sure that if you've got a set of skills that you want to be able to deploy, that you do it, then you can, good things will come from it. When we moved to Hong Kong in the early 70s, it was the same kind of thing. I had a set of skills that were somewhat tangentially connected with the job that I was looking at.
Yeah.
But people at the time didn't want to go and work in Hong Kong. I mean, this is a difficult thing for people to understand today.
Yeah.
But the Cultural Revolution was still underway in China. Who knew when China would decide to cut the water off to Hong Kong,
right.
and the Red Army would just come across the border, and the 2 battalions of Gurkhas up on the border wouldn't have made a bit of difference. But I said, hey, I've got the skills to be able to do this, and it's a bit of a reach, but I'm going to give it a try. So I'm not sure, resilience, maybe, but I think it's just, being able to, what's the Browning saying, a man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven for? So I think that is probably as good a description of what I was going through at the time as any. But anyway.
So, okay, pivot. I want to talk about resilience because I do believe it's a characteristic that you have, and I think you have it in great quantity, and I think you demonstrate it frequently. And so over the last, let's go back, I think in the last 14 years, you've had a series of, you were a very competitive runner. You were a footballer as a younger man, competitive runner. You enjoyed that, being physical, and you've had a series of fairly significant injuries, starting with the Achilles and on from there, right? Over even up until quite recent, somewhat recently. And yet, there's never been a quit in it. There's never been a, well, I can no longer. It's always like, how am I going to move on to the next thing? And to me, that is what defines resilience. Is that, and I remember speaking to you from a hospital bed after something last few years, and you literally, it was the day that it happened, the accident happened, and you said, your words to me were, from the waist up, I'm great. Now, I'm not sure if that was the fentanyl talking, or
could well have been.
But so, where does that come from? How do we not mine it? But you know what I mean? Like, is that and you can attribute some of it to sort of that directly post-war generation, stiff upper lip and, keep calm and carry on and all that nonsense, right? So, but where do you think that, was that something that Ted and Edna had a role in? Is that just something from over the course of your life that you've developed a resource of? I don't know. Like, that's what I'm curious about.
I never really thought about it, but it's interesting that you frame it that way. And I do think, that Ted, my father, was a type 1 diabetic, and he was very fragile.
Yeah. And
the technology was nothing, and the medicine was nothing like it is today. In spite of that, he found ways to be able to excel at the things that he did, as in the print industry, for his whole career, his whole working life. And so I suppose overcoming challenges, difficulties like that is something that it certainly was part of my life growing up. At the time, I thought, God, this is just awful. I really find this such a difficult element in life to have to deal with. But my mother, who nursed him through all of it, never gave up.
Yeah.
And I would say that, and I'll tell you, so this is interesting. So she came from a farming background,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And what I've learned more recently in the last 20 years about farmers is that almost regardless of the circumstances they find themselves in, they will find a way to get on with it and sort of make it happen. And not this season, but last season, talking to a peach farmer in the farmer's market, and she said, she matter-of-factly said, yeah, I've lost 75% of my crop this year
goodness.
because it rained and then it froze, and so the blossoms were all destroyed. So So I said, Penny, how do you deal with this? And she said, we're farmers.
You just do it.
We do it.
Yeah.
This is what we do, and that's true of several farmers and actually, winemakers.
Yep. Well, they are agriculturalists at their heart, right?
And they have to. And every year there's more rain, less rain. There are fires. There's too much wind.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a constant battle for them to have to try and figure out how they adapt and move on. So I would say it's adaptability rather than resilience.
Okay.
That's the quality here. That I think probably, that's what I watched growing up.
Yeah, you saw it.
I saw it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe that's how I managed to. I'd forgotten about the from the waist up I'm fine comment, but yeah.
There's sort of, I think about that. I also think about the Achilles injury, and prior to that, you had been running. That happened at the London Marathon, I believe, right? Or shortly thereafter, right?
Probably.
But
I mean, we don't really know. But
and so that was the inspiration for the first and so far only Tiffin Men's Day, where Stuart, you and I ran the Healdsburg Half Marathon.
Yep.
And you came second in your age group.
I think I did.
Yeah. So anyway, it's always been, not to get sappy, but it's always been something that I've admired in you, and I've seen it. Whether it be adaptability or resilience or whatever you want to call it. I've always admired it, and it's always been a characteristic that I've striven to emulate and to model for the next generation of my kids as they go through their challenges and routinely quit or don't quit certain things. A funny side note, one of the things we do at the gym is called the farmer's carry.
Oh, yeah.
Where you have a heavy weight in both hands.
Right.
And we did a 400 meter farmer's carry.
Oh my Lord.
And I had a 50 pound, and I'm not one of the stronger members of our gym. I am definitely on the lagging end of that. But one of the things we ended this workout with was a 400, it was two 400 meter farmer carries. Of these, I had 50 pound dumbbells, and I was working with this.
You had two 50 pound dumbbells?
One in each hand.
Two 50 pound dumbbells?
Yeah, one in each hand, and you're supposed to carry it. You're supposed to set them down as little as possible. One of the people I was walking with, because you're walking, they're a medical student, a former collegiate hockey player. She is one of the beasts at our gym. And we get to the end of the alley. We put the dumbbells down, and I'm just like, I'm going to take 15 seconds, and I'm picking back up, and I'm going to finish because I just wanted to get this over with. And so I pick up. She's like, I'm not ready. I'm like, we're not together. But so she picks hers up. We go, and we start going, and then she drops like halfway through. But I got back at the end, and the coach was like, she's like, you come from farm folk, right? And I'd never really. It's not something I talk about frequently, but I'm like, I guess I do. I mean, yeah, like 2 generations prior. But there's a thing there. So anyway.
There is a thing there, and the farmers will do things. Farmers rarely are trained in the things they need to be trained in, like bookkeeping and what's my gross margin, and how am I going to make money this year given so it's and I can think of my grandfather and my uncles and so on, and they would just get on with it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
the job, or it's the life. It's not
Yeah.
even a job, is it?
No, it's a life.
Amazing. Come back to the wine as we start to get to the end here. Thank you for that, by the way. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. This is phenomenal.
It is.
I know. I've
delicious.
been a fan of Cartograph since we had the good fortune to taste, I believe, Pinot Days in Chicago. They came through. That was the
They
first time I actually
did.
tasted that.
That's right. And they had a tasting in the what's now the W, I think.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
I've always been a fan. And again, we were talking yesterday about how they're closing up their tasting room in downtown Healdsburg.
Right.
I was a little bit bummed about that, but then I feel like it's much more in the vein of who Alan and Serena are to have it be sort of a on the vineyard experience. Those stories, I mean, I went into that tasting room even after I wasn't a wine club member anymore, and Serena would come out from the back and she's like takes over the tasting for you, and, just such a
It's the property that they bought that they are now turning into their tasting room, partly a winemaking place as well, and they've got a cottage on the property and so on. It was a slaughterhouse.
Oh, good gracious!
It was,
okay.
and so they've still got the hooks on the ceiling.
Yeah,
I know.
okay.
So it's going to be a totally different, and they'll have stories to tell.
Of course,
right, about that.
Of course.
So when Mum and I went in there, what was it, a month ago now, I guess. They decided they'd have all their wine club members and the people who go into the wine tasting room sign the bar in there.
Cute.
So we signed the bar.
Keep it cute.
We
Absolutely.
were here at the very beginning.
That's awesome.
Jane and Howard. So it
Love
was
that.
good. Yeah, absolutely.
And I'll be able
So-
to pick your signature out, because it's so unique. So that's
Yeah,
fantastic.
Thank you.
Great. So the last question, the final thing is, because plays on words are sort of my favorite thing, and this is called wine a bit. What's getting on your nerves right now? Be as vague as you want.
No, I mean,
And you're allowed to say my brother. Just kidding.
I wouldn't do that. What's getting on my nerves a bit at the moment is no matter where you look in the world, just about, democracy is in real trouble.
Okay.
And I'm just, it gets on my nerve because it's not the right path for humanity to be trying to follow. So
I should have known it would be deep.
If there were more Lee Kuan Yews in the world, we'd be able to rely on, the philosopher king to
Lee
help
Kuan
us.
Yew?
Yeah, the former prime minister the late prime minister of Singapore.
Okay.
Who took Singapore from independence from Britain in the 60s to becoming one of the most successful countries in the world.
Yeah.
And it still, in spite of all the competition, continues to thrive under, now it's the third generation of leadership since he since he gave up the reins. But anyway,
So there's a model. There's a model out there.
maybe.
Ish.
There aren't enough Lee Kuan Yews in the world. You either get Lee Kuan Yew or Bashar al-Assad.
Okay.
And which you don't want Assad
no.
as the alternative.
Yep.
So, we have to be really careful of people who have monarchical aspirations
yes.
becoming responsible for countries.
A great irony coming from an Englishman.
I know.
Anyway.
Sorry about
Dad,
that.
it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking
No,
the
no,
time
no.
and providing this wonderful bottle of wine. Love talking with you. And, hopefully we'll get to do this again at some point in the future.
Maybe we can drink the other 2/3 now.
There we go. All right, love
Okay.
you.
Love you. Good health.
Well, I've been drunk 1,000 times. Well, I'm sober up So I work hard and I spend my pay to get me through these nights and days. And out in Napa Valley, do they think of me?
You have been listening to Wine a Bit with Simon, a podcast about conversation and people, and every so often also about wine. The podcast was written and created by me, Simon, and our theme song is the track Napa Valley by Chicago area country punk pioneers, the Waco Brothers. Find out more about what they're up to at their website, wacobrothers.net. And remember, life is too short to tolerate bad wine or bad conversation.